place for a little while the religious services moved back there to Parkersville Road. In 1927, Reverend Martin had died, and Reverend William Forsyth came from Charleston, assigned by the diocese to take over Faith Memorial Mission and Holy Cross Mission. Again, the chapel is still back on Parkersville Road, and the one at Berkeley. And he probably did pretty much what Reverend Martin did, parochial school, small classes, few kids, and back and forth. A lot of back and forth there. It was a landmark moment. Some of you will remember Nathan Brown, who was a priest here for many years. He recalled the event later when he said, "Salvation came to Pawleys Island in the person of an Episcopal priest." It was a really important moment. And the campus, that, as we know it today, sort of became possible in 1932. Mr. Huntington, Archer Huntington, had bought Brook Green Plantation, and he was trying to consolidate the property. And there was this 1 acre property in the middle of it that was owned by the Diocese of South Carolina, and he thought, well, I don't want that right in the middle of my entrance corridor. So he offered to buy it from the diocese. 1 acre back in those days was probably worth about $10, and he paid $10,000, hoping that the money could be used to pull the two together. And it was. And this building, as a result, was constructed in 1932 and dedicated. There's a cornerstone at the back of the and the building was intended to serve two functions. One, as a school for the children, and two, as the rectory for the priest and his wife to live in upstairs. Later on, we'll go upstairs if anyone would like to tour up there and see what that was about. Reverend Forsyth flew solo for 10 years because his wife, Ruby, was taking care of her mother, parents in Charleston. And Charleston was a little further away in those days than it is today, and they couldn't just pop back and forth. So she stayed down there. She was a trained teacher, had trained at the schools in Charleston, and then had gotten a university degree. But so she was teaching in Charleston while he was up here teaching. She joined him in 1937 after her parents died. And Viola Martin, who had been widowed and remarried into the Brown family, came and taught as well. So she was the third teacher here at Holy Cross Faith Memorial Baptist. This is the combination of the two in this building. Look around. It's a one-room school. It had oil lamp brackets. They're still there, back there on the wall. There was no electricity. This was oil lamps. Wood-burning stoves. Here are the chimneys. Stovepipes, 4 of them, 4 chimneys. There was no indoor plumbing. There was no running water. You see a pump out in the yard if you take a look out there, hand pump. So it was simple stuff. But I think those who remember it would also say that Pawleys Island was pretty simple in those days. It was a different world. The BMW dealership wasn't here. The school served children from the ages of 3 up to the 10th grade. Miss Ruby took on the young kids and nurtured them. And Reverend Forsyth focused on the older people. And then prepared them to go on to high school and college, which many did. High school in Georgetown, largely, and then college wherever they went. That was a pretty amazing thing for its time. And the public schools weren't in the area, which there were some, but they weren't pushing that kind of level of achievement as a rule. It was a classical education, and as including foreign and ancient languages. As somebody said at one point, he said, if you talk to many of the bricklayers in Pawleys Island, you'll find out that they can speak Latin and Greek. That's quite an accomplishment. At one time, the school was said to have had over 100 students in it. Now, if you can imagine that, I can't. I don't know how that worked. But here we are. And it was in a one-room school as with the Montessori school, you know, the older kids help teach the younger kids, the teachers teach everybody. They heard the process, and everybody learns in a sort of a growth-oriented way, but they grow at their own pace, but they had tests, standards, discipline, and it worked. The Parkersville Road Church burned in 1943, and services were held in this building until 1952, and that's when the chapel was built. Reverend Forsyth died in 1974. Miss Ruby carried on with the younger children, and the older classes fell to the wayside after that time. She died in 1992, having in her last years secured many honors. She was interviewed by NBC News for a national broadcast. She was recognized as one of the 1,000 points of light by President Bush. She was published in, Women Who Matter in South Carolina. She was well noted by that time. After her death, her assistant Carolyn Wallace led the school until it was formally closed in 2000. And by then it had about 30 students up through 3rd grade. And I overlapped with that 1 year, so I remember that at the time. At the time, it was the last one-room school still operating in South Carolina. And it was still using that one-room school methodology, not 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. It was, you're in school until you're not in school. And it was effectively ungraded, which was in itself kind of a collectible thing, that curriculum. As I said, many of you know this story better than I do, and I won't pretend to embarrass myself further with that, but I wanted to read to you the remarks that were sent by Virginia Harness of the South Carolina Department of Archives and History, who was the person who shepherded this through the organization in Columbia and Washington. She couldn't be here today, but she wanted to get some words on the table. So, the South Carolina Department of Archives and History offers its sincere congratulations on the listing of Holy Cross Faith Memorial School, also known as Miss Ruby School, in the National Registry of Historic Places. Established in 1966 by the National Historic Preservation Act, the National Register is the official list of our country's historic places worthy of preservation. The National Register is administered by the National Park Service, but largely facilitated by the preservation offices in each state and territory. It was the pleasure and privilege of the South Carolina State Historic Preservation Office to help bring this nomination to fruition. Holy Cross Faith Memorial School joins over 1,500 National Register listings in the state of South Carolina. While the National Register may bring to mind old stately homes or military forts, we also have listings for service stations, tabby ruins, swing-span bridges, country stores, beach motels, rice fields, mill villages, and many other resources that represent various aspects of our collective history. The National Register program has not always provided a full and accurate picture of American history. In acknowledgement of that, the National Park Service is actively supporting efforts to diversify nominations, including grant funding to nominate properties associated with underrepresented groups. While the Holy Cross Faith Memorial School nomination was not grant funded, its listing nevertheless marks another step toward broadening our view of history through National Register nominations. Over the last 5 years, properties listed for associations with Black histories have comprised 30% of new National Register nominations in South Carolina. And that percentage includes 12 listings for African American schools, from the tiny late 19th century Holly Springs School in rural Greenville County to the nationally significant Scotts Branch High School in Somerton, which is associated with one of 5 court cases that became Brown versus Board of Education. You all remember Briggs versus Heather. Among these recent school listings, Holy Cross Faith Memorial School stands out for the longevity of its service, the continued use of traditional teaching methods into the late 20th century, the academic success of its students, and the remarkable educational accomplishments of its two primary teachers, Reverend William Forsythe and his wife, known to all as Miss Ruby. The unique story of Holy Cross Faith Memorial School represents an important component of the history of Black education and is a worthy addition to the National Register of Historic Places. Contrary to popular belief, the National Register does not require preservation or place restrictions on private property owners. It is a largely honorific program which aims to identify and document historic places rather than regulate them. While the program encourages and incentivizes preservation, the stewardship of property owners and the local community is what ultimately protects historic buildings. So keep up the good work. In the hands of this community, we hope to see this 92-year-old building preserved for many more decades to come. The National Register staff of the State Historic Preservation Office commend Holy Cross Faith Memorial Episcopal Church and the local community for their efforts to preserve this school and recognize its historic importance, and congratulate them once again on its listing in the National Register. So, that's awesome.
I want to take this opportunity to thank John and Jack for the historical review you just heard. And I'm not going to be long. I wanted to really commit a crime. But it gives me great pleasure. And all honor and glory goes to God. Amen. It's nothing about me. He's erased me from anything. 70 years ago, this was my classroom. Viola Brown was my first grade teacher. Ms. Ruby was my third grade teacher. Reverend Forsythe was my fourth and fifth grade teacher. So we go way back. And so I'm so gratified, and we have some students here. They know cousin and president. They can tell the story better than I can. I left Paul's Island in 1951, but this is I've been here all the time. And that song that we just sang is so touching. And we are 100 years from today. I just hope we can reflect on this place. And I understand that National Registry, you try to preserve buildings, archaeological statues, whatever. Here, I'm going to have a seat. But I thank all of you, the church committee, the reverend, and all of you who had something to do with getting this place recognized. God is still good. All the time for you. So I just thank you, and I'm elated. You have my heartfelt thank. I can't give you anything else.